Here's your host, Alex Garrett.
Ladies and gentlemen, you could have been anywhere in the world tonight, but you're here with us in New York City. Are you ready?
Welcome inside Adapting with Alex Garrett.
Oh, if the shoe fits wearing.
Let's adapt together right now. Well, this country is about to adapt to a new administration, a new presidency. I think the fact that we're into President 46 shows the longevity of this country, and I think the fact that we are at 46 helps preserve this country in one way or another. You know, some people believe that Trump should have a second term. I say this was the way it was supposed to go. And Joe Biden is the new president of the United States of America. Someone who was cheering outside his apartment, I guess, and was doing what, heard a lot of stuff around his neighborhood in Queens. And he's New York truck stop's own Zach Miller. Firstly, your feel of the day, doesn't it really feel like a fresh start?
Oh, it does. It absolutely does. It's funny, Alex. So many of my friends and so many people I saw on social media, around December 30th, December 31st, they were saying, no. January 1st is not New Year's this year. January 20th is going to be New Year's because they were very much ready for this new administration to take shape. And I think we really saw a lot of that, again, both on social media today and as you alluded to in my neighborhood. I did hear a lot of cheering at around 11:45 noon today out of my apartment.
But there's work to be done now, as Biden even alluded to. And part of that work does deal with adapting to new transportation secretary. I believe that's Mayor Buttigieg. And he's got a solid deputy secretary who I happen to see you standing next to at a DOT, what was that, a press conference, rally? I mean, tell us about Pollys Trottenberg and what she brings to the table now. Yeah,
absolutely. So that was a press conference. Gosh, that must have been 3-4 years ago at this point. DOT had some new truck-only signs on the FDR, so that press conference was about that. And, I was representing the Trucking Association at that press conference. And I personally met Commissioner Trottenberg 4 or 5 times. She was always very gracious with me. I don't believe she ever knew my name, but she recognized me as quote unquote, that truck guy, which honestly, a lot of people in city government, that's kind of how I'm known. And I love that. There was another press conference we were at together. I don't have a picture of it, but it was a freezing cold day out in Brooklyn. It was about the BQE. And the makeup of that press conference there were a lot of local advocates there, a lot of local elected officials who particularly are a little bit more anti-truck on the, anti-truck side. And the commissioner, made sure to thank me for being at that press conference. She was the only, when I was announced as a speaker, she was the only person who clapped and cheered for me. And I always remember that, and I always appreciated that, her support. So, as you and I are going to talk, there are definitely things that we disagreed on, but her professionalism and her respect is something that I always admired. And it's something that I think all Americans, whether they agree with some of her policies or not, should be comforted in knowing that she really does have she treats people with respect and dignity and professionalism, and that's something to always be something to admire about her.
Do you think the Biden administration knew for transportation they had to pick someone from New York? I feel like that was part of this choosing, was it not?
I think that's a great point. Especially because, as you alluded to with Mayor Pete, who's a very interesting guy. A very smart, capable guy, but not somebody who, South Bend, Indiana has 100,000 people. I think, Pollys Trottenberg had about a quarter of that just on staff, so yeah, I think having a New Yorker, somebody who knows transportation issues on all different levels the way that she does was really important for this administration. And certainly, they didn't know when Mayor Pete was nominated, they didn't know at the time that Senator Schumer would be the Senate Majority Leader. but he is now, and he and Commissioner Trottenberg go way back. She used to work for him as an aide. So yeah, I think this does line up very well for New York and sort of a New York type of agenda being presented forward.
Do you think he had others in mind to have this role? Do you know much about the selection process for the deputy secretary?
That's such a great question. I don't. I know that she was tapped very early on to be part of this transition, and I do know that she led meetings, transition meetings with people in the trucking industry, as well as train and public transportation agencies. So I know she was very intimately involved in the transition. She really was running point on transportation issues for the transition. So my guess would be they keyed in on her for this role pretty early on in the process.
Well, everybody was kind of questioning why Elaine Chao was the transportation secretary. I mean, did you see any improvements under the Trump administration, serious improvements that maybe didn't get highlighted for New York?
I did. And I'll tell you, Elaine Chao was a very interesting character. She was such a smart, competent administrator at DOT. However, I will say, personally, it never passed the smell test that she was married to McConnell. Again, that's legal. That's not a conflict. It's just a Zach Miller type of issue. I'm stricter than the actual rules are. However, to your point, yeah, she did some really good things. She streamlined a lot of antiquated regulations on the trucking industry. She gave drivers a lot more flexibility without compromising safety, which was huge. And she gave drivers, the actual truck drivers, a larger seat at the table than they had, in previous administrations. So certainly from that perspective, I think Secretary Chao did some really good work at DOT.
Well, what I'm thinking is, as you're talking about this, is seat at the table and whatnot. Now you got another administration dealing with the COVID crisis, and truckers, do have those late night shifts still. They're still going out there. So what COVID protocols would you like to see this administration continue from last or change from last?
Certainly. I mean, they have to just redo this vaccine rollout from the ground up. I mean, the rollout has been a disaster. We are losing ground every day in this fight, and really, I think anything that could be done to ramp up a vaccine rollout would be great. To that end, I really do think truck drivers should be treated as the essential workers that they really are, and sort of be prioritized in some of these vaccinations that we're seeing across the country. In some places, they are more in front of the line. In other states, they're really not. And I would like a sort of federal, maybe not mandate, but sort of a federal announcement that, listen, truck drivers are essential. They're essential to the economy. They're essential to fighting COVID. And we got to make sure these people are getting the vaccines sooner rather than later.
Well, do you know if they're also trucking the vaccines? I know we saw them flying them, but are they trucking them across the country as well?
Yeah, they are. Typically, they'll be flown into major distribution hubs at some of these major airports, and then trucked to either warehouses, and this is another issue, that there have been vaccines kind of sitting in warehouses because of poor communication, and then retrucked to hospitals and clinics and some of these larger vaccination sites.
Well, that's good insight, because I think people just got the impression, they're flying this thing all over the place. How are they? And that's how I was perceiving it. Anyway, we talked about trucking way early on in the crisis. Have you seen any improvement though from when we first talked about this to now?
Not exactly. I wouldn't say things have gotten worse, but I don't know that we're seeing the improvements that we need. It's also interesting because as the economy started to open back up, a couple of months into the pandemic, we started seeing a little bit more traffic, and that sort of delayed some of the essential truck trips. And also, here in New York City, as you well know, we're seeing so much curbside space sort of repurposed for outdoor dining, for outdoor storefronts. I know New York City has this outdoor culture program that's going to start in the spring. So, from just a spatial standpoint, trucks are having less space to maneuver, despite the fact that still so many Americans are working from home.
I am so glad you mentioned this because let's say New Yorker Pollys Trottenberg decides, I want to take a look at the bike lanes that de Blasio has installed. Could she repeal any of those? It sounds crazy, but I feel like they could be doing something if they wanted to.
I think to that point, it's not even so much couldn't they repeal them. I think it's more, could we have a more unified goal? Because the way this has happened in this city, bike lanes they predated her, but it's something she's very passionate about. They certainly increased dramatically under her administration. It's something she really cares about, but I'm sure she'll be the first person to tell you it was not done well. Just between where they were placed, sort of backlash against them from certain communities. I think even, people who really do love bike lanes will say they didn't put enough in. You have other people who say they put too many in. You have other people.
No, did they put too many in? I don't know. I don't remember writing about that or not. But
no. But believe me, you'll come across some interesting characters at community board hearings. I'll tell you that much. And I think on her portfolio now with the feds is sort of better guidelines for how you put in bike lanes, where they should go, where they shouldn't, what they should do, how much space are you taking away, and what are you taking away from? Are you taking away parking space? Are you taking away curbside access? Or are you not really taking away any space? Maybe you're taking away just a little bit of a travel lane, and that's it. So those are sort of the big picture issues that would help.
I think also right now indoor dining should be reopened because we could get rid of those street,
oh my gosh,
street side
you're
outdoor
so
dining.
Choir on that. I mean, and this is not something that could really come from the federal government, but it would be nice if President Biden would say, yeah, and we really should open stuff up under proper COVID guidelines. Of course, it can't just be a free for all, but let's sort of push stuff open again. There was a picture making its way on social media, with Bernie Sanders sitting there at the inauguration, in his coat and mittens and whatnot. And, people had fun with that. And I actually, I took the picture and I made a comment. It's like, oh, he's just waiting for his meal outside New York City.
Oh, no.
Because there's no indoor dining. It's like, let's open stuff up reasonably and properly and sort of put more people back to work, get things going in a better direction here.
Well, look, I don't know how many people know this, but Cuomo's already threatening Biden. This story is insane. For those who don't know, apparently we're promised $15 billion. I thought there was going to be 2, but apparently it's 15. And we need that shot in the arm, as I've said time and time again. But if Biden doesn't come through, Cuomo, who I really believe, Zach, wants the presidential seal on his darn platform every time he speaks now, will sue his own president, his own party's president. What is this?
It's just Cuomo being Cuomo, putting something out there that's, as I would say, bold as it is ridiculous. That he would actually threaten to sue this incoming Biden administration over a New York State bailout, as if Biden doesn't have enough on his plate right now. He needs Cuomo running around threatening him. It's like, but on the other hand, you see something like this and you're like, well, yeah, no wonder Cuomo wasn't part of the cabinet. That
too. They probably saw that in him.
he is. Yeah, exactly.
By the way, he thought it was such a heroic move to stay in the state capitol. I'm like, you know what? I don't think if they care if you were in Niagara Falls today, okay? I don't know what you thought it was going to be good saying that for.
It's just everything's about Cuomo, always, and it's like Biden today. He spoke about unity and wanting to bring people together, and that's been his MO most of his career. And then obviously all the challenges that he faces now, and then he's literally not even sworn in yet, and you have Cuomo demanding $15 billion, or he's going to sue the federal government.
Because remember, Schumer promised $2 billion already, so that's where I'm looking at right now.
And look, New York is going to get some. New York's going to get a lot of money here, but at the same time, New York has to look inward and make some changes to the way they do business. It's not COVID accelerated a lot of problems that the state was going to have regardless due to poor planning and management.
No doubt about it. Now, I want to get away from Cuomo and politics. I want to talk about you personally, because I think when we all were here in 2017, we were like, I think we can survive these 4 years, but let's just make it. Are you surprised we actually basically got through the Trump presidency? Are you kind of surprised by that?
That's such a fantastic question. I had such low expectations for what it would be, and it turned out to be even worse than my expectations. Now, as you and people who listen to my show, who listen to me on your show, know I'm more pessimistic by nature than you are. But I did not have a whole lot of rosy expectations, and my gosh, the last 4 years were rough. But am I surprised we survived it? No. I mean, this is a very resilient country. This is a very tough country. This is a country that has been through some horrific things and came together. This is a country that has accomplished some amazing things. So no, I mean, I always will bet American, when push comes to shove, but that doesn't mean it's always an easy or enjoyable ride. That's for sure.
No, it's not. And I was thinking, do you want to bet American and buy American? Let's add that in there too.
I will buy American every opportunity I get. That's for sure. Because you know me, I'm a big manufacturing supply chain nerd. I want. Well,
you got to be in that industry because remember,
exactly.
trucks get the supply chain going, do they not?
Exactly, 100%. And I want us to make as much here as possible, and I want it to be moved all across the country to the extent that that's possible. So,
and by the way,
I was a big fan.
I blanked on it before, but I remember it now. In addition, when we last talked, we actually saw the supply chain really weakened the last time we had talked about this. Has that improved at all?
Yes, that definitely has improved. We're really not seeing shortages to the extent that we did early on. Now, there have been some shipping issues, particularly with USPS. And, between the holiday season coinciding with the beginning of the vaccine distribution, shippers were kind of pushed to the limit. But, other than the vaccine, there were plenty of supplies available. It was just, how long does it take to get them into people's hands? And I think that's probably going to be tight until, we're at the vaccine level we need to be, and until some of these USPS problems are fixed with, you figure the incoming Postmaster General will have a lot of work to do, but it should be able to get itself sorted out.
Reconstructing some of those post boxes might be a good idea first.
That's a place to start.
I've got a question for you, though. I did see over the years, and I would always send you this link. Hey, did you see the? And for those who know, I used to be very Trump all the time. Like that was my thing. And then 3.5 years into it, during the COVID, I said this is not working. Anyway, the times I were in favor of Trump, and I'd see the truckers support him, I wasn't surprised. I was very interested to see how they lined the White House to support him. Did that surprise you at all, though, Zach, over the years?
No, not at all. First of all, the industry does lean more conservative / libertarian. So certainly that sort of base is in Trump's wheelhouse. I think a lot of people really did resonate with when he spoke towards some of the more, economic issues. And, there is another aspect of this, which is a lot of truckers, particularly the over-the-road truckers, do listen to talk radio frequently. And we know talk radio loves Trump. So it really all made sense there. So, no, I wasn't surprised by that. And I thought it was really nice that, he would invite so many truckers to the White House.
Absolutely. He got it.
Yeah, that he tried to get their perspective on things when making policy. That was always refreshing to see from him.
All right, bro, you want to talk about adapting and the adaptability of this? Because I do believe we always have to adapt to transportation. I still think an adaptation would be nice to remove the 1 to 5 shutdown. That would be nice once in a while, pretty soon. But that doesn't look like it's going anywhere for the moment. But what adaptations can even the city make to correlate with the administration? Like, this is a two-way partnership now. So what can we do as a city better to work with Washington?
Yeah, that's such a great question. I think the big thing that Pollys going to push for, and also New York electeds are going to push for, is MTA funds. Certainly, we know how important public transportation is to this city. We also know how poorly managed the MTA has been. So I think between funding on the one hand, and then hopefully more streamlined management, I think better leadership. We could have a stronger transit agency, which should help. It is interesting, though, because there is so much unknown in the post-COVID world. For example, so much of the MTA design is getting people into and around Manhattan, and it's just hard to say that Manhattan-centric business model is going to be the New York City model moving forward. In fact, frankly, I would bet against it. I think the action, and yes, you and I are Queens boys, but I think the action that we've seen in the outer boroughs these past 10 months is not going to go away once COVID subsides. So I think that's something that really both, Trottenberg and Mayor Pete and the New York City congressional delegation should keep in mind as they move forward with some of this mass transit policy. Obviously, in terms of trucking, again, to that end, we've seen such a boom in e-commerce, which shifts the way deliveries happen. It used to be pre-COVID with large e-commerce, we saw about 60% of freight went to commercial zones and commercial enterprise, and about 40% was delivered to residential. COVID hit, and that was completely flipped. I mean, we were seeing as high as 80% of deliveries going to the home. Now, again, once the pandemic subsides, we're not going to see 80% of freight moving to households, but it's going to be a significant number. And that completely changes, truck routes, truck parking, residential parking, even the way streets are designed, because typically, your residential streets are pretty narrow,
right? And
they should be because, well, you're not sticking a truck in there. Well, now you might need to stick a truck in there. So what happens with that?
Well, look at this. And as you're talking about this, I'm thinking about the flipped over bus that we just saw in the Bronx.
Yeah.
I mean, that's scary for a trucker to see, is it not?
Oh, absolutely. Anytime you see a really bad crash, particularly when it was because of driver error. You have to take stock in that, and you have to sort of, for a driver, evaluate your practices, and from a company standpoint, evaluate your safety and training, because sure, that particular event was a bus driver, but it could easily have been a tractor trailer. You're
talking about the adapting to the streets and all that. I gotta know, if you were in that position in the transportation department federally, but you had a very local mindset. Now you got to focus on it nationally. How does one take that local on the streets of New York and say, well, how do I focus to a street in Texas or something like that? Like, how do you do that switch?
So that's such a great question. And there are two ways to do it, right? There's the good way and the bad way. And let me just start with the bad way, because one of my few concerns with Commissioner Trottenberg is she is really, really close with some of these, as my dad likes to call them, quote unquote, transit advocates, who really push a lot of these street redesigns on a national level. It might, to a New Yorker who's not in on this, it might think like, oh, this bike lane is so very New York centric, but these groups push the same sort of plan across the country. And so certainly there's information and data there that Trottenberg could easily grab. The problem is, and as you so well put it, from a sort of design, theoretical standpoint, that might work. But in terms of what that community in Texas actually needs, what the residents there need, what the businesses need, might be very different, in the real world. So my advice to her would be to go there, to get a read of the businesses, of the residents, of what the community wants and don't want. And that doesn't mean that just because they don't want something, you can't do. If you really think it's for the best, that's part of the job of being in government, of being a leader, is making tough choices like that. But you have to get their point of view. You can't just look at some study, some research project, and think that'll be acceptable. And, to her credit, she's always been good at engaging every stakeholder for a project. She always valued that. She always kept her word on that, and she was so much better than her predecessors at City DOT at that. So to anybody who's listening around the country who might be nervous about some of those things, I can tell you from experience, she always engages in stakeholders. So we won't see bike lanes on Lombard Street, the most crookedest street in the world, right? We're not gonna... You know what? Maybe it's some sort of like Olympic event. I know. The Olympics are going to be in LA. I wouldn't even try that hill, and I rollerblade everywhere. Maybe we could have that one event, maybe that one fundraiser type of thing. But no, that would be for a braver man than I. And as I said, I wouldn't try that either, and I rollerblade everywhere. I just wouldn't. Well, and you're the expert. If you wouldn't do it, then I think probably nobody would. Zach, I highlighted this because, as we see, the president is the president, but he has all these people around him. And I think a big gift from Trump was that we knew he had people around him, because they always resigned or they quit or he got fired. He fired him. But no, people around these presidents are important. And I think finally people are trying to figure out who's around Biden now. Am I right? And if it wasn't for Trump, that wouldn't happen. I think you're very much right on both accounts. They are very important. They've always served an important purpose. That's kind of what the show The West Wing was about. But yeah, I think Trump did take that to a different level, and I think people are starting to see that with Biden, especially because look, at the end of the day, Biden is 78 years old. He's not going to announce it until after the midterms, but it's very unlikely he's going to run for a second term. I think he even mentioned himself as a transitional candidate, and I think that he is going – it's funny, because Trump was the businessman, but I think Biden is really going to lead as a CEO. You know, he's going to be the guy to make the final decision, but the deputies, I think, are going to be empowered to do a lot of the day-to-day work, which, to your point, means who those deputies are becomes even more important. And you know, as we were talking about offline a little bit, as we mentioned, you know, Trottenberg's a pretty good deputy to have for a transportation agency.
Well, I think I'm going to leave it. I have so many questions, but we can get to them on another time because we haven't even gotten to the whole the 47 unoccupied assembly seats. I want to have you on for another podcast about that because that matters too, who we put up in Albany, and I want to get you on for another thing. But I'll leave it on that note that she's a great choice, and we will see what happens, Zach. And thanks for joining me to talk about this today.
Oh, my gosh, absolutely. Anytime.
And I'm Alex Garrett. As you know, we're always adapting. Stay with us. That was perfect, man.
Oh, I loved it.
So I'm going to send you a link. I'm going to actually tag Polly. I think she might get a kick out of it if she